Hello and welcome to Module 5. This module is looking at UbD and gradual release of responsibility. You have two readings from Fisher and Frey, and these are chapters on gradual release of responsibility that also do touch on UbD. I also uploaded for you some additional supplemental resources on gradual release of responsibility. The video that you see from Dr. Doug Fisher is helpful in describing gradual release of responsibility and the different components of gradual release of responsibility for you, and how he addresses the idea that you do not have to go in the traditional format of gradual release of focused instruction, guided practice, collaborative, and independent, that you can put those in any order that you want as long as all four components are there. We also have two additional PDFs of some reading on gradual release, but again, these are supplementals for you. Please also do not forget about Assessment 1 for this module, which is based on Modules 2 through 4's material. So today, I wanted to spend some time going over with you a little bit more in detail the template that you'll be submitting on Thursday to the discussion board for your text set draft, and submitting then the following week for your final text set grade for this class. I also urge you to look at the text set lesson plan 4 resource document that I have attached for you that goes into more detail about the lesson plan strategies that you have or skills that you have to choose from for that particular lesson. So I wanted to spend a few minutes looking at one of the moonshot examples, and this is the social studies example, but the template is the same for social studies and in science. But that science example is a new example that I uploaded for you at the end of last week. So in your introduction, you're going to talk about your students in regards to their abilities as readers, writers, and thinkers. So thinking about who your students are, why you chose your particular topic, and your mentor text. So when you're writing your introduction, it's really helpful to have a conversation with your ELA mentor teacher about who your students are and why you chose this particular topic for your lesson plans and text set for this class. Stage 1 for UbD is all about the desired results, and remembering that UbD is a backwards design process, and that we start with the end game in mind with what are we wanting to do with our lessons and get out of this unit. We're wanting to meet specific standards, so we start there with our standards, and you'll see here that for each of my lesson plans I've identified appropriate Common Core standards and Mississippi College or Mississippi Framework standards for social studies, and then the science one for science. For lesson plan 1, you need to look at the reading informational text standards. For lesson plan 2, you need to look at writing. For lesson plan 3, you're looking at either language or informational text, craft, and structure. And then for lesson plan 4, you can look at informational text again. You could look at speaking and listening standards as well. Once you've decided your standards for your text set, you're then going to use those standards to craft your objectives. And I have my objectives here. Now, one thing I wanted to point out is that you do not have a percent accuracy here. You have the words accuracy or accurately and proficiently, but you do not have a percentage tied to those. In ELA, you do not always have a percentage tied to your lesson plans in regards to a percent accuracy, like you would for a math lesson. So it's okay just to put accurately or proficiently for objectives here. You also have the long-term independent accomplishments that are desired, and these are things that are broad ideas that you want the students to be able to do not just with these lessons, but then with lessons that you'll also do, later on in your class. So we want our students to know the process of explaining and analyzing diverse informational text, how to compose a narrative, and then identify key historical figures and their contributions to American society. The next section is meanings. And so this is focusing on your understanding. So what will they understand with this particular unit? And then what are some essential questions that you want them to keep thinking about with your unit as you go through these 4 lesson plans? So these essential questions will address both the social studies and the ELA component. And then for acquisition, this is the last part of stage 1. You're going to focus in on what knowledge do they need to know, or will they know by the end of this unit, and what literacy skills will they be proficient in by the end of this and have acquired through the end of your unit. Stage 2 is your evidence. So this is where you think about your evaluation criteria and your performance tasks, your formative and summative evaluations that you'll be doing with your students, or assessments that you'll be doing with your students to ensure mastery of content. So in ELA, a lot of times we use checklists and rubrics to evaluate the mastery of standards, and I'll be using checklists and or rubrics to evaluate my students' understandings of these lesson plans. Remember, we're going to be only teaching lessons 1 and 2 in the classroom, but we are going to, in this text set, and in our 4 lesson plans we create throughout the semester, pretend that we would be teaching all 4 lesson plans. So having as much detail in lesson plan 4 as we do in lesson plan 1, with all of our materials and components that we would need to teach it if we were actually teaching lesson 3 and 4 in the classroom. So I'm looking at how I'm going to evaluate each performance task and the criteria that then my students will be able to do when it comes to that evaluation. So for lesson 1, for example, they're going to be able to pose questions about a topic and then answer them. The performance task then, to show that they really understand how to do that, they're going to be utilizing a KWL+. For lesson 2, they're going to write a narrative text on Apollo, and the performance task then is writing this narrative from the perspective of one of the astronauts. Lesson 3 is a vocabulary strategy, and then lesson 4 is an eyewitness testimony chart. And then for the unit for this particular set of lessons, they would complete a unit test to demonstrate mastery at the end. My evaluation criteria is where I'm going to decide how I'm going to evaluate with either a rubric or a checklist. And you can see that I have selected one of those for lessons 1, 2, and 4, and then I'm using their vocabulary activity to assess their vocabulary knowledge in the lesson as well, for lesson 3. For other evidence, I want them to also be able to participate in all group work activities and pass all of their assessments. And so this will also show that they're developing an understanding of the material, being successful in these particular items as well. Stage 3 is really the meat of your text set. And stage 3 is what we're going to take and flesh out into our full-fledged lesson plans over the rest of the semester. So for each of the lesson plans, you're going to have your focus. So our first lesson is a comprehension lesson. I have my standards here, my text that I'm using, and then a summary of the lesson with my objectives, my literacy skill that I've talked to my teacher about, that I'm going to be teaching my students, the strategy from the Buell text that corresponds to that skill. And then my instructional summary is about the gradual release of responsibility and is an overview of what I'm doing in teaching my lesson. So when I get to lesson plan 1 and actually fleshing it out in class, and then submitting a lesson plan, a full out lesson plan on that, I have an overview right here of what I'm going to do, so I'm not thinking about it for the very first time in a few weeks. I also then have my citation for my skill and strategy, which comes from Buell. So I'm doing this for all 4 of my lessons. So this is the example of my writing lesson plan, my vocabulary plan. And you can see here in vocabulary, I've identified terminology that I'm wanting to use with my students. And then my disciplinary literacy, my lesson plan 4. After I have all of my lesson plan sketches completed, I'm then going to provide a rationale for all of my texts that I've chosen. So in my first text set, text 1 is going to be my mentor text, and I'm going to provide the APA citation and then my rationale for this particular text. If your text is an honor book or an award-winning text, you need to tell me which particular text it is, won an award. So this book, for example, has won the Robert Siebert Honor Book Award, and what that means. So who receives the Siebert Award, when was the book won, and what are the criteria for that. In your rationale, you need to include the Lexile level. You need to include why it's appropriate for your students. So I've done that for all 4 of my texts, or all of my texts here. You need to have at least 4 supplementals and 1 mentor text, but you can see you can have more than that. I have more than that listed here that I'm going to be using in my plans. I have 8 texts, including my mentor text. So with your rough draft of this document you'll be submitting this week, the more information you can have in this document for Thursday, the better off you are in getting feedback from your colleagues and from myself, so you fully understand kind of where you need to go with this. So the more you can provide information for me and your colleagues, the better. Please make sure you look at the directions, you look at the rubric, and you look at those documents that you need for lesson plan 4 to help you figure out what you want to do for that disciplinary literacy lesson. Remember, I will be in my office hours on Thursday night and can provide you with some assistance with this document. I'm also going to be in office hours on Tuesday night from 6 to 7:30. So if you want to come by office hours then and talk to me, ask me any questions about the text set then as you're working on the document, I'd be happy to provide you some assistance on Tuesday night as well. All right, thank you.